Thank you for your interpretation. Okay. The energy in the room is just palpable. So this is exciting. Have a seat and we will, I know it's been a very full day and hopefully there has already been a word, a phrase, an idea, a question that you have captured as a part of the day, whether it was part of the morning sessions, the teaching this afternoon, and it could have been around the table during lunch. So we are hoping that this conversation that we are continuing here will just continue to expand beyond here. Our workshop this afternoon is called Meet Me in St. Louis, and we're really talking about that in two ways. Lonnie will be speaking directly about going to St. Louis as a delegate and what some of those practices, maybe some strategy around that. Christian and I will be speaking about meeting in St. Louis, perhaps more in a metaphor. I am not a delegate to General Conference. I am a pastor in Houston, Texas. I serve at Chapelwood United Methodist there, and I'm the pastor of Mercy Street. And I am someone that over the last 12 to 18 months, I have decided to take my head out of the sand and to really take seriously the fact that we are in covenant with one another, that we are a connectional church, and that connection depends upon the vitality and the vibrancy of local congregations. So I want to offer just a few thoughts and then look forward to hearing from my friends and colleagues. Maya Angelou once said, "A bird does not sing because it has an answer. A bird sings because it has a song." A bird does not sing because it has an answer. A bird sings because it has a song. Now, this quote is attributed to Maya Angelou, and she wrote bravely and poetically and courageously about why she knew that her caged bird had sung. But what she is pointing out in this moment is not only the beauty of the bird, but the purpose of the bird, which is not to provide answers and solutions within our world, but to provide a healing balm, to provide a song, a melody. As a pastor, there are times where I am invited into situations where individuals are asking for an answer as to why the cancer has returned. They're asking questions and looking for an answer as to how in the world their child had a meth addiction for 15 years and they had no idea. Asking questions about why the marriage has ended or the career has bombed. In those moments, despite the fact that we long for answers, what we need more than that is a song, a melody. And song has the opportunity to bring us comfort. It has the opportunity to open a window of hope, and it gives the chance for beauty to begin to rise out of the ashes of pain. And my friends, right now in our ecosystem of the United Methodist Church, we have been looking for answers for 46 years. And the work we've done through commissions, the wrestling, the problem solving, all of that is a necessary part of the equation, but it's not the whole story. We as United Methodists still have a song to sing. And my friends, the baton has been passed to us as we get ready to go to St. Louis, as we get ready to enter into our local context to have these difficult conversations. Can we enter into them in such a way that we are not looking at problems and solutions, but we are bringing the unique song that we have to sing? Can we speak with a clarity of mind and spirit? My friends, the chorus of our United Methodist song is still strong. Maybe you know some of the verses. We have been saved, we are being saved, and we will be saved. That we believe salvation is deeply personal and necessarily social. That salvation is by faith alone, but a faith that bears fruit of mercy and justice and love. That our scriptures are not just a collection of answers to the world's sin-stained condition, but that our scriptures are a beautiful song of restoration, of recovery, of transformation. And that God has given us all a gift of our identity, the gift of our calling, and yes, even the gift of our sexuality. And these are gifts we are called to steward and to worship God with. But my friends, the church has done a piss-poor job of talking about sexuality. That's totally okay in my context. That's okay. That was the cleaned up version. Yeah. We've done a really poor job of talking about sexuality. It's mostly been about denying the flesh, that it's flesh or the spirit, that we have talked about sexuality as this disorienting experience, and the church remains silent. We talk about prohibitions rather than this gift and this beautiful expression of sexuality that we have been given. And even our founder, John Wesley, was not exactly the poster child for talking about relationships. Sophia, she marries another, he denies her communion, a failed engagement, a marriage that was complex. Abram, Sarai, Jacob, Leah, David, Bathsheba, Solomon, 1,000 concubines. The church has wrestled with how to speak about sexuality. And even Paul, in his letters to Corinth and Rome and other cities, he was grappling with ways that sexuality had once been a part of worship, and now he was trying to describe it in such a way that it was gift. And that through sexuality in our relationships, we learn how to love just as God has loved us. And so let the bar of our intimacy, of our sexuality, of our relationships be this: does it bear the fruit of the Spirit? A bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. A bird sings because it has a song. And it was a song on a stormy night on a ship where John Wesley watched a group of Moravians pray and sing. And his fear dissipated. He saw an inner strength. He saw a version of faith that he had been longing for. So, my friends, is it not time for us as United Methodists to sing our song? In Hebrews chapter 11, it's often called the Hall of Faith or Fame. Hebrews chapter 11, beginning in verse 13, all of these people died in faith without receiving the promises, but they saw the promises from a distance and welcomed them. And they confessed that they were strangers and immigrants on earth. People who say this kind of thing make it very clear that they are looking for a homeland. If they'd been thinking about the country that they had left behind, they would have had the opportunity to return to it. But they're longing for a better homeland, a better country, a place designed, built, the architect, God. Friends, these are difficult times. The way ahead of us is difficult to understand and to navigate, but I am not willing to go back to a homeland of fear. I'm not willing to return to a place that diminishes the imagination, return to a place that says to anyone that they are less than, no matter your beliefs. Let me just end with an image, a picture. Perhaps it's familiar to you. It's a picture of a cellist in Sarajevo. His country had been bombed, was in an incredible civil war. This cellist of Sarajevo saw the destruction, the crumbling, the war, the devastation around him, and he felt helpless. He didn't have answers. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a war strategist. He played in the orchestra. But one day, he took out his cello. He went down to a place that just the day prior, 22 people had been standing in line for bread and were killed when the bomb hit the area where they were standing. And this cellist played a song in G minor at that exact spot where these people had died. And he returned for 22 days straight to play a song in memory. Now, please hear me. I would never make light of genocide or war and compare it to the current state that we are in, but we find ourselves in shambles. Institutionally, the divisiveness that seems to separate us. And it can be very easy to say, I'm a member of XYZ United Methodist Church. What am I going to do to contribute to the larger narrative? Let me encourage you today to sing your song. He didn't deny the reality of the rubble. Instead of in the marble halls of a concert place, he put on his tux and starched white shirt and sat on the ragged, jagged, dusty rubble of this place and began to play. So traditionalists, progressives, we need you to sing your song. Gay and straight, we need you to love, to teach us how to love. To the contemplative and the activists, we need you to pray and respond. To the songwriters, the engineers, the scientists, the teachers, the explorers, we need you to dream, write, speak, draw. My friends, we need to remember our song as United Methodist and to begin to sing it with clarity, with conviction. If my memory serves me correctly, in St. Louis, there will be about 1,000 people who are gathered. 1,000 tongues. Today, could we even pray together by singing that great Wesleyan chorus? Oh, for 1,000
I have the privilege of serving alongside Melissa Maher at Chapelwood United Methodist Church in Houston. And I was challenged today with what I was going to present because it's contextual for me. It's challenging for me to speak into the conflict we find ourselves in. And I don't know a ton about holy conferencing other than what I've learned by studying it. And I was supposed to talk about holy conferencing, but I think there's lots of procedural CSI stuff coming, so I am going to just try to be honest. Why am I a Methodist is the question I want to answer for you right now. And because I wasn't always, and I haven't been a long time. I didn't grow up in church. I have no church baggage. I have no church hurt, thankfully. I came to church initially because that's where the girls were. And in Houston, Texas, where the girls were when I moved there was Windsor Village United Methodist Church. So my first expression of Methodism, what Methodism meant to me was you go out and you change communities. You go out and you feed the poor. You go out and you change the lives and the destinies of people. That was Methodism to me. This first time I'd ever seen it. I didn't know anything about cross and flame. I was wondering, why am I going to a church with a burning cross as its symbol? But I digress. I got over that. That wasn't an essential. Windsor Village, community transformation. I went from there to its sister church called St. John's Downtown in downtown Houston. And the mantra at St. John's is, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Said every day, said every week, said all the time, and it was all about feeding the homeless people and dealing with people who were left out, left behind, right outside the doors. When I got there, Skid Row was right outside the doors. It's gentrified now, and yet St. John's continues to soldier on as a place where love is the imperative, where anyone has the right to be in the pews and be treated with dignity and be served and serve. See, Methodism to me was community transformation. Methodism to me was feeding the poor and being a lighthouse and being a love imperative. That's what Methodism was to me. I didn't know any of this other stuff you guys are talking about. The third place where I ended up now is Chapelwood United Methodist Church. And Chapelwood is this interesting place. It's like the one church plan is actually happening every day where I serve. 7 different worship communities. And we're the Pepsi kind. You know, we don't have to all have the same name. We're not American Express. So Mercy Street, and there's Upper Room that I pastor, which is intentionally multi-ethnic and very, very diverse. There is a Hispanic church, and there's another one that's across the freeway in another area. And then we have 3 different expressions of Methodism, if you will, in our main sanctuary. And then downtown, east of downtown, we have something called Holy Family, which is kind of a neo-orthodoxy Eastern monk regalia, whatever Jacob Rees is doing. It's crazy, but it's contextual. And somehow, in the same, when we get together in a room, there's 7 lead pastors and a senior pastor. Somehow, even though some of us went to Asbury and some of us went to Duke, and a couple of folks have snuck in and had some classes in Claremont, even though we're all across the theological spectrum, we have chosen to follow what the Council of Bishops has said when they said that this is not something to split over. We do this every day. This is our reality. This is my experience. So when I walk into this muck, can I say muck? All right. When I walk into this muck and approach this muck, all I bring to it is this kind of wide-eyed, what is going on here kind of feeling, because it hasn't been my Methodist experience. You understand? And I feel like what I want to say to frame the next 7 minutes of talking to y'all is based on a story of a man who was beaten within an inch of his life on a road and left and was bloody, and the church looked on, and people looked on and passed it by, and people did nothing about it. And then finally grace came to this man. And when grace came to this man, he rose up, and one day after his wounds had healed and he had an opportunity to speak out, he said these words in the book of 1 Rodney King, chapter 1, verse 1, "Can't we all just get along?" See, Rodney said these words with an interesting set of kind of naivete. Rodney said these words as if now that he's come through what he's come through, and he's seen what he's seen and been through what he's seen and become the symbol that he'd become, that uncovered all kinds of brutality and malfeasance in the police force and all kinds of things that have been happening for a long time in our communities. He finally came to a place where he was the one saying, well, but I've also experienced some grace in this. I've also experienced some people who were unlikely to be helpful to me. And he stood before microphones, and instead of throwing out vitriol, what he threw out was this grace-filled message and hopeful, almost cockeyed, optimistic message of all getting along. I don't know a whole lot about holy conferencing, but I do know something about change. It's what I did for most of my career. I've been a pastor now for about 6 years now. But for most of my career, I've been a management consultant. And a lot of that's been involved with change management and strategy. So if you don't mind, I want to end by just talking a little bit about how things change. Because I think change is actually a process. Change is not an event. Change is not 3 days in St. Louis. Whatever we come out with, change is not 3 days in St. Louis. But what I think 3 days in St. Louis is just a moment, an event. It's a disturbance, if you will. And change, as far as I'm concerned, is something that I've learned only comes and only happens when what is the status quo is disturbed. If you look at the natural order of things, in my old life, we used to call it the idea model. And the idea model was the process of things changing or adapting or moving. And I think we're in this process. You'll see some of this make some sense to you. It starts with what is. What is something that is a matter of perception. What the United Methodist Church is right now is a matter of perception, a lot of perceptions. A lot of conflicting perceptions. And until you can get those perceptions kind of lined up and seen and some understanding around them, it's very, very hard to move past where you are. It's very, very hard to break out the status quo or break out of complacency when you have so many perceptions that aren't necessarily being voiced. Well, as they've bubbled up to the surface, we've noticed that now we have some brutal facts that we have to deal with. If you want to kind of go through the model from there, you have to go to a place of saying what could be. And what could be is all the work that you do to figure out and dream about and think about what could be, what's out there, what can we project out to, what are these different types of models and outcomes we could project to. What's God's preferred outcome? That's the what could be stuff that's many times the most disturbing. Why are so many people being triggered by these three plans? Because it's disturbing. Because it's moving into a place where it's triggering your emotions and triggering the things that have made us complacent. I'll come back to that in just a second. Some of the brutal facts I have on the next slide that are just out here. Some of these things I had before, and some of these things I wrote down this morning. The one church model was created out of contempt, was said by someone with a really great haircut. It is being said out there forcefully, with a whole lot more amens than I'm getting in here, forcefully, that the one church model is based in contempt for those in the center and for those who are traditionalists. Contempt. Like there's we're doing this just to rile those people. We're putting this together just to force them out and show contempt for their position. Gay marriage is. Gay ordained clergy is. Being gay is. Today someone said the Bible is wrong, and I watched the room. You'd be surprised. This is not scientific, but 20 or 30% of y'all had a little bit of quickening. A little quickening happened. Some of you were like saying, I'm supposed to walk out now, right? I'm supposed to walk out right now. It's that kind of triggering that happens. The Bible is infallible and without error. Bible's wrong, Bible's infallible. This is not an issue to break up over. And then some people are out there saying on nice videos, this is something we should have broken up over a while ago. These are the brutal facts that finally getting into the what could be stage, the disturbance stage, causes. But I say to you, this is a good thing. That there will be no change if you do not deal with these brutal facts. There will be no change, there will be no adaptation unless you actually are awakened to the need to adapt and change. One of my heroes in my old life was a professor at Harvard named John Cotter. Cotter wrote a book called A Sense of Urgency that is a seminal text in change management, a seminal text in how organizations change. But I tell you that I find lots and lots of parallels with how things have changed, both scripturally as well as things change individually. And I just want to leave you with just a couple points about Cotter that I think are salient today. Cotter says that you have to create a climate for change, which we're talking about now with with disturbance. I think that's creating this climate for change. But he says what you have to watch out for when you're kind of moving towards changing an organization or changing a paradigm or changing yourself is your enemies are complacency, number one. That you can actually be locked in a pattern of just keeping things the way they are and ignoring the problems and the issues that are looming. I think of this as the children of Israel going in circles for 40 years. There's all kinds of things looming, but let's just keep things the same. Let's just keep things the same. And complacency is the enemy and the antecedent to change and moving forward. He says what you have to watch out for even more than complacency is something called false urgency. False urgency. It's that frenetic activity that doesn't have productivity with it. It's doing stuff and doing stuff and doing stuff and creating programs and creating initiatives and creating projects and creating stuff. And it's moving, and nothing is actually happening. Don't get fooled by a lot of activity and think that that's actually productivity. The Judaizers, as Adam Hamilton pointed out, were frantically following around Paul and the gospel being spread to the Gentiles so that they could frantically have more activity or snip activity that had no productivity behind it. It's actually as divisive as it was productive. True urgency is what this current situation calls for. Cotter would say that, and this is so interesting that he puts these words together this way, and this is not in any kind of with any kind of spiritual idea or mandate or inspiration as far as I know. Cotter said this. He said that true urgency is a slow, relentless action that confronts the brutal facts, yet never loses hope. Slow, relentless action that confronts the brutal facts, never loses hope. Melissa mentioned Hebrews 11. Hebrews 12 picks up on those people who'd gone before, that hall of fame, and says that we're surrounded by all these folks who are the examples for us. And then in very Cotter-like language, it says, therefore we need to run with patience the race that's set before us. It's a marathon or Olympiad type metaphor. But before we do that, we have to face the brutal facts. We have to lay aside the weights and those things that so subtly trip us up. I am glad to stand in this space between the wonderful inspiration of the urgency of singing our song. We need to sing our song now. But also, I want to just put out the call and put out the fact of the matter is that this is not a sprint. This is not an event. This is a marathon. And if I can quote my guy, Sinclair, who was standing up here earlier, I'm up for it. I'm up for it. Are you up for it? Are you up for a slow, relentless action that keeps hope? Because that's what we're in for. That's how change happens. That's how adaptation happens. And we do it like Jesus did it, looking at the joy that's set before us. Enduring all this, we then get the opportunity to finish our race and win. God bless you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lonnie Chafin. I'm the conference treasurer in Northern Illinois Conference, which means my career is finance committee meetings. So I ask you to be alert of everyone at your table over the next little bit. Not sure what might happen next, but my job today is to tell you how you could be part of helping to get this thing passed. And I want to say at the beginning that earlier this weekend, over the weekend, I was in Nashville with 50 General Conference delegates, and we talked about the One Church plan. I have to confess, sometimes I get discouraged about what might be forward for our church. But after that conversation with 50 delegates, all who span the spectrum between conservatism and progressivism, I've never felt so hopeful that this might happen. Those delegates came to support the One Church plan, all but 5 in minutes. And we had scheduled our time together to kind of nitpick the thing to see, who wants this piece out, who wants this piece out. But the group kind of said, this whole thing's a compromise. We won't get it perfect for ourselves. We want to live with the compromise. Because everyone there knew that when you are in relationship with people of a different theological bent, your faith gets sharpened. Your experience of grace gets opened. You become challenged in your theology. It is necessary for you to grow in your Christian discipleship to meet people different than you. And all of them had, when we first came, it's people from all over the theological spectrum, and all of them knew someone of a different theological stripe that they loved, that they respected, that helped them, and they knew that this was the church for all of us. So I want to say, for those who are, there will be discouraging days, but there's a reason to hope. It just, at long last, it just might be now. So my job is to talk to you about how you can help participate in the strategy of Uniting Methodists to getting the One Church plan adopted at General Conference. We have done some. Now, we don't have mailing lists. We don't have 10 years or 20 years of history with relationships and all of these things. We don't have mailing lists. We don't have donor lists. We don't have anything that some of the groups who don't want this church plan to pass have. What we have is you, and we need you to be that resource that others have developed over the last 10 years. And it's so I'd like to introduce a couple ideas we have for how you could be the supplement we need in order to make things happen. We need you to talk to your delegates, especially the ones you know, maybe even ones you don't know. Maybe your church sends a letter. Maybe you write a letter. Maybe your Sunday school group writes a letter. Maybe you find a way to go to the listening sessions many delegations are having, and you speak your mind. All delegates are going to be told churches are going to leave, and nobody wants to vote for something that's going to blow up their conference. They need to hear other voices that say, we can handle it. It's going to be okay in our situation. Our context needs this. They need to hear your voices, because the voices of fear and worry about churches leaving will be amplified and are going to echo through the whole chamber. So your counter voices that's reassuring and present is very necessary, because I think most General Conference delegates don't want to do damage to the church, and they don't know every context. So what you say to them will matter immensely. Here's the other thing we don't know. If we could put my slide up. We need some intel. So we have a Survey Monkey. SurveyMonkey.com/r/UMC delegates. And for those of you streaming from home, you're at the computer. Let's get started. So on this site, there are two things to do. And you can do it while you're here. I know I'm handsome, but look away and do what you have to do. The first thing is we're asking you, there's a place where you can choose your conference. And once you choose your conference, you'll see the list of general conference delegates from your conference. The first question we ask is, do you know where this delegate stands on the one church plan? Are they strongly supportive? They lean support? They're neutral? They may or may not support? Are they lean against, or they're strongly against? If you don't know the delegate, don't answer. You don't have to answer. In fact, if you don't know, please don't answer, because bad information, guesses don't help. So don't guess. But if you know, please check the box that tells us about your delegates in your conference, so we can begin to collect who our partners are, who might need some convincing, who we can talk to directly about potentially supporting the one church plan. And then the second question after that is, if this is someone you know and you're willing to be a contact for them, just tell us. Check the box that this is somebody you're willing to make a direct appeal to. And we're trying to develop some resources that will help you kind of make those approaches and be able to talk to delegates. Now, before it gets to that, the top part is your name and email. And just the way SurveyMonkey works, we had to do the questions in reverse order. If you don't want to tell us who you are because you're not going to get emails about talking to them, you can just skip that question with your information. We don't really need that unless we know you want to talk to a delegate, and then we will follow up with you in that regard. So you can skip through the information if you don't want to give it, but even if you give the information, delegates no one's going to know what you've typed about them, right? So this is all confidential, and it's just for us to begin to build our database around who's on the team, who we need to spend most of our time building relationships with. Now, the key part of our strategy right now is we're not going to rebuild an entire network on the fly. What we want to do is find existing networks. We're asking general conference delegates to get into groups of 10 to 15 to 20, that old small group Methodist style, perhaps study the one church plan together, and we want to be a network of networks. So we're going to work with current groups and be in relationship and build a common strategy with delegations. If a delegation is working well and largely one church plan, we'll have a representative from there to work with, to be involved with our strategy. It might be a caucus group. It might be anyone who might be interested and has a group of delegates willing to work together. So we're not trying to rebuild all of the networks. We're going to try to be a network of networks and bring everyone together on a common strategy. And of course, that would mean on-floor communication so that we can anticipate what we think will be a very parliamentary, rigorous kind of challenge. You said it. All right. But we want to say to General Conference delegates, I don't understand the country at this moment. I don't understand what's going on in the country. I find it anxiety-ridden and confusing. I mean, NATO is at question. We might not be in NATO. I mean, it's like the Americans are criticizing Canada. Who criticizes Canada? I mean, it's like the Tom Hanks of nations. Nobody doesn't like Canada. I don't get it. So I guess what I want to say is, in this era of disruption and confusion, you were going to need to say things that are just plain obvious and common sense. You have to be surprised how you have to argue for common sense. But it has to be said. Things you presume don't have to be said and just everybody recognizes probably have to be said now. So I ask you to go and make this effort. Don't just assume that someone's going to make a common sense decision. I want you to talk to them and ask them to support the One Church plan. Explain why you hope it works for them. But especially for General Conference delegates, I don't think we can succeed if you presume that everyone's just going to come to the right common sense answer. I think you need to connect to what else is going on, because the powers of disruption and the tools of disruption have been honed and are so strong now, that you kind of got to be in communication with folks so we aren't disrupted. So I want to ask all General Conference delegates, find a way to connect to some other General Conference delegates, connect to our network of networks so that we can anticipate what might be some parliamentary undermining of good process and work together to make sure that the kind of democratic outcome is what happens. The best way to resist those who want to break the church is to be the church. So be the church for your General Conference delegates. Small groups, thoughtful consideration, pray for each other, be in relationship, challenge each other in the faith, move towards the promise of God's commonwealth for all people. Because it's time for all those who love the church. It's all at risk. It's time for all those who love the church to do something you've never thought you had to do and stand up and ask for it to endure into the next age in the name of God who is the wind and inspiration in your life, the one who animates your community, the one who has promise for all the world. God is not done with this church yet, not done with you yet. Please be involved in this way. Finally, I will tell you that as of 10 minutes ago, the Commission on the Way Forward's proposal was posted on the Judicial Council website. We have copies of the One Church Plan for everyone ready to distribute, so we will start handing those out for your reading pleasure.
Glad it wasn't